fans? I'm the 20-pound weigh-in shorts of mixed martial arts, Tommy Toehold. And UFC Fight Night Almeida versus Garbrandt is coming up this Sunday night, which means you're probably wondering what my fantasy picks are going to be, so let's break this motherfucker down from top to bottom. First up, we have Adam MILSTEAD taking on Chris De La Rocha. Heavyweights finish fights, and these guys are no exception. This one is not going to last very long, so do not get up and take a piss. Rocha was TKO'd in his UFC debut last July, and I don't think he fares well here either. MILSTEAD is light and fast, he's got a wrestling pedigree, and he's a quick starter. He won his last 3 fights in round 1 via TKO. MILSTEAD for the win. He could score lots of fantasy points Sunday night. After that, we have hot up-and-comer ALJAMAIN Sterling taking on fan favorite Bryan Caraway. This is a fight I think a lot of people are misjudging. Aljo has been solid, winning 3 of his 4 UFC bouts with finishes, but don't sleep on Bryan Caraway. He's got a ton of experience against some really high-level guys, and he has 17 submission wins. If you're thinking Sterling is a fantasy lock, I'd pump the brakes. This could be a dangerous fight for the young gun. I'm picking Sterling, but if Caraway wins, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers. Up next, we have ERIK KOCH taking on Shane Campbell. These are 2 guys that need a win badly. It has not been a great UFC run thus far for Campbell, and KOCH has lost 3 of his last 4. That said, those 3 losses come to Darren Cruikshank, Dustin Poirier, and Ricardo Lamas. In other words, much like the Wu-Tang Clan, ERIK KOCH ain't nothing to fuck with. 4 of his last 5 wins come via first round finish. I don't think Campbell has enough experience against high-level fighters. KOCH for the win. After that, we're moving on to Jake Collier and Alberto Pieta. 2 guys with not too much experience. These are the types of fights that can make or break your fantasy team, which is why I try to avoid the fuck out of them. You never know what you're gonna get from a fight where they have a combined UFC record of 1-2. That said, Pieta is unbeaten, has a very high finish rate, and has trained with a great camp in Nova União. I'm going with Alberto for the win, but don't quote me because I ain't said shit. Next up, we got Abel Trujillo taking on Jordan Rinaldi. The only fighters to beat Abel Trujillo since 2011 are Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson, and every win since 2012 has come via absolute destruction for a train from Murder Town. He's on a 2-fight win streak with 2 first-round finishes. His opponent Rinaldi is making his UFC debut. Killer Trujillo is the pick, and he could end up scoring you some decent fantasy points. Moving on to Sara McMann versus Jessica Eye. Both fighters are on a 2-fight skid in the UFC and need wins badly, but this will likely not be a great fantasy matchup. Neither fighter has a very high finish rate, and I don't think we'll see a finish here either. Jessica Eye is the more volume striker here, but she'll have to contend with McMahon's wrestling. I think this one will be a wash for your fantasy game, with Eye winning a decision or possibly a split if she's able to neutralize McMahon's wrestling. Either way, neither of these fighters are on my MMA fantasy squad goals this weekend. Up next, we have Josh BURKMAN taking on Paul Felder. BURKMAN is a longtime veteran of the sport. He has some pretty impressive wins, including a round 1 finish of John Fitch. In his most recent UFC run, though, he has not fared very well, with 4 of his last 5 fights ending with a loss. His last UFC finish came when Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith was still in theaters. Felder's a knockout artist with 7 KO TKOs and 11 victories, and he just finished Darren Cruikshank via submission in January. He's also never been stopped in his career. Felder is the pick. He's the most likely to generate serious points in this bout. After that, we have Jorge Masvidal taking on Lorenz Larkin. Last we saw Masvidal, he lost a split to Benson Henderson, but has impressive wins over Tim Means, Mike Chiesa, Pat Healy, and Darren Cruikshank. If they formed a band, it would be metal as fuck. He doesn't get a ton of finishes though, winning 4 of his last 6 UFC bouts via decision. Larkin's wins as of late have been TKOs, but the last time Gamebred was knocked out was 2008. Both fighters have very similar striking and grappling stats. Could be another wash like McMahon versus Eye. Going with Masvidal to get the decision, but he's not going on my team. Next up, we've got Chris Camozzi versus VITOR Miranda. This is another fight much like Aljo versus Caraway that you really can't sleep on the veteran fighter. Camozzi may only be 29, but he's amassed 33 fights, 23 wins, and of those wins, 14 finishes. He's gone up against very high-level talent, including Jacare Souza twice. That's like staring in the face of Cthulhu and realizing human existence is meaningless and not giving a fuck about it. This dude is not going to be intimidated, and 3 of his last 4 UFC wins come via first-round stoppage. Miranda is a KO artist, but has started his career in the UFC relatively late at 35 years of age, and has not fought the same level of fighter as Camozzi. Oh, and did I mention Camozzi's never been knocked out? It's a trap! Avoid this one in your fantasy games, fight fans, and fuck it, I'm going with Camozzi via decision. After that, we have Tarek Saffiedine taking on Rick Story. One glaring stat to consider here is that 8 of Saffiedine's last 9 wins come via decision, and that 1 stop came in 2010. The problem is these guys are harder to put away than a cockroach made of adamantium using a fly swatter. We are not likely to see a finish in this fight. That said, I think Story's wrestling and his ability to not get hit, he has the 2nd lowest absorbed significant strikes per minute rate on the whole card, will get him the decision win, and if he stays active, which I believe he will, a decent amount of fantasy points. On to the co-main event. Renan Barao is taking on Jeremy Stephens. I love this fight so fucking hard. I think a lot of people sleep on Renan Barao, but the only person to beat him in the last decade is named TJ Dillashaw. This man eats people's souls. 4 of his last 5 wins come via stoppage. He has 23 finishes and 33 wins. That said, Jeremy Stephens does not fucking play. This guy has 16 KO TKO wins, and he's only been finished 4 times in 36 fights. These guys are straight up killers, and it could come down to who gets hit big first. Barao lands 1 more significant strike per minute on average than Stephens, but he also absorbs 1 more per minute, although I think that stat might be skewed by Dillashaw hitting him 340 times in the fucking face. Barao is too good, too fast, too furious, Tokyo Drift. I think he returns to form here and wins big. I'm going with Barao, and he could be a huge point scorer this weekend. Finally, we move on to the main event of the evening. 2 unbeaten up-and-comers who put people to sleep on the regular. Thomas Almeida versus Cody Garbrandt. This fight is not going the distance. It might not even go a single round. Almeida has amassed 20 wins with 19 19 stops since 2011. He has 16 first-round finishes. This man is death personified. His opponent, Cody Garbrandt, is also a bad motherfucker. 5 of his 8 wins come via first-round KO, TKO. There's not going to be a lot of feeling out in this one, just a whole bunch of destruction. The key stat here is significant strikes landed per minute, and Almeida clocks in at 6.82. The closest on the card is 4.33, and it's not Cody Garbrandt. That said, Almeida absorbs a considerable amount of strikes per minute, and Cody will put your lights out fast. But he has not fought a striker like Almeida yet in the UFC. If Cody can land a big shot here, he can win this fight, but it's hard to pick against all those numbers. Almeida for a first-round finish and possibly the most points of the night. And that's UFC Fight Night, Almeida versus Garbrandt. See you on Sunday night, fight fans. Let's do this shit!